In my previous benchmark video, the 1440p high RT results at 71 FPS was the number that surprised everyone, including me. But the result doesn't happen by accident. It happens because of how the game's settings actually interact with each other under the hood. And once you understand that, the recommended settings stop feeling like a random list and start making complete sense. So, in this video, I'm covering 3 configurations: 1080p without RT, 1080p with RT, and 1440p with optimized RT. Each one is built around how this game actually behaves on 8GB VRAM, not just what looks good on the spec sheet. One quick note before we start: all testing here uses DLSS enabled, but I had to disable HAGS in Windows. On the current build, leaving HAGS on was causing severe game launch crashes on my system. Just keep in mind, turning off HAGS automatically blocks DLSS frame generation from working at all. So today we are focusing purely on base scaling performance. Hopefully a patch fixes this soon. Also, if you're doing heavy settings changes mid-session, restart the game before major adjustments. There's some kind of VRAM quirk happening here, where settings that ran perfectly fine for over an hour can suddenly become unstable after repeated menu tweaking. Restart the game, load back in, and the VRAM behavior becomes clean again. Let's start with the foundation. At 1080p with DLSS quality, ultra textures, and mostly extreme settings with no RTGI, this is the safest configuration for 8GB GPUs that manage it. And honestly, it's genuinely impressive. Benchmark average sits around 70 FPS, but actual gameplay is even better. Outside the city, you're regularly seeing high 80s to low 90s. Forest stays in the mid-high 80s. Dense city areas usually stay above 70 FPS. Now VRAM still gets dangerously close to the ceiling in heavy scenes, but overall it stays manageable. And at normal laptop viewing distances, DLSS quality in this game looks pristine, especially in motion. This is the configuration I'd recommend if RT isn't a priority or you simply want the most stable experience possible. This is basically the performance ceiling without the risk. Now here's where the real decision starts. This became my favorite mode visually, and before I give you the settings, I will explain why. Because understanding what RTGI is actually doing here changes how you think about every other settings in this game. Without RT lighting, night scenes in open world games tend to fall into what I'd call ambient lighting mode. Everything gets this soft, even lighting distribution. The world stays visible, it still looks good, but nothing has real shadow depth. Light sources stop being like actual light sources. The atmosphere feels slightly flat. With RTGI enabled, that completely changes. Shadows form correctly around the light sources. Streetlights create actual pools of light instead of just brightening the entire area evenly, and suddenly the city at night starts feeling like a real place. That's why this exists as a separate recommendation. Because this isn't just a performance trade-off, it's a fundamentally different visual experience. Now for the actual settings: DLSS quality, RTGI high, RT shadows medium, high textures, everything else ultra or extreme where VRAM allows. Benchmark average sits around 61 FPS, and by the way, this is at 1080p. Gameplay outside the city in the 70s. Dense city areas usually sit in the low to mid 60s. So yes, there's a meaningful performance hit compared to the non-RT mode. But for what you gain visually, especially at night, I honestly kept coming back to this configuration. Now before we move to 1440p, I need to explain something important, because this is the part most optimization guides completely misunderstand. RTGI doesn't calculate lighting in isolation. This is what you need to understand. It calculates lighting across everything already loaded in the scene. Every geometry detail, every texture surface, every asset currently sitting inside VRAM. Which means RTGI quality is directly tied to overall scene complexity. The heavier your textures and geometry settings are, the more work RTGI has to do, regardless of whether you have RTGI on low, high or medium. So at 1440p with ultra textures and ultra geometry, even low RTGI is already processing a much heavier scene than it was at 1080p. The baseline cost is already elevated before RTGI quality itself adds more load on top. And then high RTGI scales that workload even further. So this becomes a two-axis problem. Scene complexity is one axis, RTGI quality is the other. At 1440p, pushing both simultaneously is exactly where 8GB VRAM starts running out of headroom, even if you lower the RTGI alone. That's why the real fix here is reducing texture complexity first. Once textures move from ultra to high, RTGI suddenly has enough breathing room again. And that is how the 71 FPS benchmark result was achieved in the previous video. So here's 1440p configuration that actually works consistently. DLS is balanced, RTGI high or medium depending on the location, RT shadows medium, high textures, geometry reduced to high, everything else turned around VRAM stability. And honestly, in lighter open world areas, this looks incredible. The combination of 1440p output, RTGI lighting, rain reflection, and the density of the world creates some of the best looking racing game footage I've captured on this laptop. But dense city scenes where the real limit starts appearing, this is where VRAM pressure spikes hard. And this is exactly why reducing textures from ultra to high matters so much, and also RTGI needs to be medium. Without that reduction, heavy benchmark scenes and city races starts pushing the 8GB buffer into unstable territory. With high textures and medium RTGI, those same scenes remain manageable. Free roam regularly stays in the 60s, city areas remain playable, and visually, I know it's a downgrade from ultra textures, but the RTGI makes it worth a while, especially those night scenes and those dawns and dusks. This is the configuration where RTX 5060 laptop genuinely starts punching above its weight class. So here's the real conclusion after all the testing. 8GB VRAM in 2025 isn't dead, but it also isn't unconditionally fine anymore. What matters now is understanding how settings interact with each other. In Forza Horizon 6, the real limit isn't the raw GPU power, it's the VRAM headroom management. And the games that expose that limit the hardest are the ones where RT lighting, geometry density, texture quality, and higher resolutions are all pulling from the same memory budget simultaneously. The people who will get the best experience on this hardware aren't necessarily the ones with the most powerful GPUs. They are the ones who understand that high textures plus high RTGI at 1440p is actually a smarter combination than alt textures plus low RTGI, because the way the game allocates VRAM genuinely supports that approach. And that's what this entire video was really about. Optimization guide for handhelds like the Rogue Ally is coming out. Subscribe if you want to see that one when it drops. See you in the next one.